Welcome to the Litera Children's Book Festival. I have the privilege of interviewing today a rebel girl, the co-author of best-selling book Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls, which is a New York Times best-selling collection of stories, an instant success, a record breaker for fundraising for literature publication on Kickstarter, translated into 47 languages and sold over 1 million copies. Quite a long list of accomplishments for this fantastic book, don't you think? Welcome, Elena Favilli.
Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, I did a bit of research about you on the internet, and I found out you were a journalist and you worked for prestigious magazines. What type of articles did you write? Was it your journalist background that helped you write the stories in Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls?
Yes, I started my career as a journalist in Milan, in Italy, which is where I'm from originally. And I was mostly, in the beginning, I was mostly covering foreign politics and especially breaking news. So, but definitely, you know, very, very different from writing children's books in a way, but at the same time, there was also something very, very important and similar at the core, which was literally the desire of explaining complex issues and complex topics in a very accessible ways. And so that really was a great training for me, and it helped me a lot when I decided to change and to start writing children's stories. Because of course, when you talk to children about complex topics, you don't want to make it sound too easy. You don't want to dumb it down for them, because you want to recognize their intelligence and you know, their brightness. But at the same time, you have to make it accessible enough. So I think the journalistic training definitely played a big role in my transition to Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. And also, you know, like that these books, they talk about real women. So the connection to reality, which is, of course, like at the core of journalism, is still present.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. Your book project has created quite a stir when it came out. I had read about it on foreign sites even before it was published in Romania. What do you think goes so viral?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. Definitely the timing was perfect, because we, as a society globally, I think we were going through a moment where people, especially women and young women especially, but also young families, were really like reclaiming their right to a different kind of storytelling, a different kind of representation in media for women, and especially when it comes to, you know, women's body and women's role in our society. So I think this book was really able to capture that moment of change and that very profound need. And then, of course, I think that the collaboration with so many different female artists, so many different young female artists from all over the world, and really like the establishment of this platform that gave voice to a plurality of voices was also an element. And then, of course, I think really the diversity and the incredible range of subjects, professions of different times and of different geographies really made this book resonate with different audiences globally.
How did you assess the need for a book about courageous girls throughout history? Because you said the timing was right. So how did you assess that the timing was right?
Well, I definitely felt like a profound need myself for something like that. So it came out of something painful also, I would say, because I really felt as a young woman that I was lacking that kind of representation, that I had lacked that kind of representation growing up. And I felt that might have played a role, right, in developing a certain kind of insecurities and some level of self-doubt. So I thought, what if we started to tell a different kind of fairy tales? And, what if we started to tell stories about extraordinary and powerful women who have existed always throughout history and still exist today in the world? And so that was really like the main driver and the main reason.
Thank you for doing this fantastic job for our girls, our daughters, for making them feel better about themselves, because they really did need great and powerful heroines, and you put them all together. Did you have a female role model as a child? You just told me that you didn't have, that many women as model, or maybe you found one as a teenager, but not really, because we all have someone in our families, like a mother or a grandmother, but maybe someone that you read about in literature or history or science books.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, I didn't have a lot of role models like across children's literature, because as we know, like children's literature, like historically has always been lacking strong female leads, right? Usually like the cool roles, the cool jobs, they're all for the male characters. But I was definitely raised by a female collective. So I had, like my mom was a great inspiration for me. She was a doctor. She was always studying. I would see her like studying like throughout her entire life. So that was like a great inspiration and model for independence and strength. And then I was raised by this collective of, grandmothers and aunties and cousins and friends. And they were, the vast majority of them were women, and really like strong and passionate and talented women. But I also, I was an avid reader growing up. So I was in love with female writers. And so I was in love with Jane Austen. I was in love with Virginia Woolf, with the Bronte sisters. And I also was very fascinated by ancient history. So I was really passionate about, characters like Elizabeth I or Cleopatra in ancient Egypt. So I was definitely attracted to, stories about powerful women who had made an impact in history.
Yeah. And this is like a lesson to be learned by girls. The more you read, the more you can, find something to write about in the future, because who knew that the books that you were reading as a young girl would ever influence you, and you ended up writing such a great book. What makes a girl rebel enough to be included in your book? How did you choose them?
It's very different for each subject, because of course you can be a rebel in so many different ways depending on the context, where you're born, where you're living. If you think about it, sometimes there are places where deciding to go out and drive a car is already considered like an act of rebellion, right? So there are simple gestures sometimes that women have to make and that are enough just to make you a rebel. In other cases, we have examples of women who instead are activists, and they maybe fight like their entire life for causes that they believe in. So the range of options for being a rebel is really big, and I think it is what makes the beauty of this collection, because you can, in a way, you can really see a reflection of the entire range of possibilities. And so I think this makes the books and the stories in the books like very relatable for girls, regardless of their situation and their experience.
your books, they are titled Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls, and this has made boys possibly avoid them. Can you tell us a few words that might convince boys to read them as well?
Yeah, well, I know that boys read them many times, and sometimes with their sisters, sometimes with their friends, or in school, because we know that, you know, schools have largely adopted these books as well. But definitely, we are an empowerment brand, and so our mission is inherently like empowering girls. So these books were really designed with girls in mind, and they were a gift to them, because as I was saying, like, we know perfectly well that girls and young women have historically been underrepresented in children's literature. So we thought that it was important to make a strong statement about this and to claim this space for girls. And then, you know, boys, of course, are welcome to read these stories, and they should read these stories because they're beautiful stories. And in fact, when they do read them, I've noticed, and this is something that I get told like time after time, they enjoy these stories. They don't, without even thinking too much about the fact that they don't feature, like, you know, they don't have that kind of lens like in their mind yet. So they don't think about the fact that they don't feature men or boys as the main characters. They find them fascinating. So I think parents shouldn't be afraid of reading these stories to their boys as well.
I read both of your books. In volume 2, we also have a Romanian girl included. How did you find out about her? How did you find out about the rest, actually? How do you do your research?
Yeah, so, the research is a big part of the process. And now we have an incredible team now, editorial team of researchers and writers. And for volume 2 specifically, we really, it was all about featuring stories that were suggested by our community, because at that point, the first volume had already become incredibly successful and had already been translated into so many different languages. So we started receiving recommendations like from all over, really, and, you know, even from places where we didn't necessarily have reach or, you know, insider knowledge. So so for volume 2, the majority of the stories that we selected came from suggestions from readers.
Do you have some favorites of your own? Let's say a top 3 of Rebel Girl favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I have many favorites. And for different reasons, but I think probably one of my all-time favorites is the opera singer Maria Callas, because she's such a great and incredible talent, but also a very complicated person. She was a great artist, right? But also she had a very conflicted relationship with her talent, with her art. So I think it's beautiful to be able to tell a story like hers to a young child. And then I think Ada Lovelace is also like the mathematician. She's also like one of my favorite stories, because, you know, she's incredible for being able to come up with this idea that is today considered the foundation of, you know, modern computing in that time, when, you know, women were not even allowed to have sometimes, most of the times, to have an education. And then I think, you know, and I'm Italian, so also I have, you know, a few Italian
Please share with us. It was my next question.
And I had, so there's a famous Italian activist, which is included in our Italian volume. Her name is Emma Bonino. She's still alive. She's an incredible activist and politician, and she's been at the forefront of civil rights and, you know, fights, like, and she's been really like leading all the major important fights in Italian society since the late 60s. And then I love the story of the female scientist who was also a Nobel Prize, 𝗟𝘂𝗿𝗂𝗏. She's also like an incredible scientist that I've always been fascinated with.
Thank you for sharing that with us. What's the biggest satisfaction that you had after publishing Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls?
Well, I've been incredibly lucky, of course, with this book series, and to see the response, to see the love and the impact that these books have had throughout the world, with so many different translations in so many different countries, to see entire families come together behind these books and reading them together at bedtime, and really this book becoming almost like an object, a symbol of an entire movement of people who really want to raise the next generation in a different way. I think this has been really the greatest gift.
Yeah, you told me earlier that Rebel Girls is an empowerment brand. It has a podcast and events and a lot of books published under this brand. But I wanted to know more about the events that you organize.
Yeah,
something online.
Yes, so we started rolling out events at the beginning of the pandemic because we really wanted to offer something that could help families around that time, and really at the same time something that could be easily accessible from our audience globally. And so now we usually have 2 Rebel Girls Fest. We usually have one in March and one in the fall around International Day of the Girl. And we feature different contributors, like Oprah Winfrey has been one of our guests, but also young rebel girls like Nandi Bushell. So we try to organize these events in the same way, or in a similar way, I should say, as what we do when we put together the stories for the books. So we really try to offer like an incredible variety of professions, talent, and to display like really like the richness of what being a woman, of what being a girl, and especially what being a rebel girl means today. And we see a tremendous response, because then people are really engaged when they can interact in real time with these women. And so it's definitely something that we will continue to do in the future.
In October 2021, you also launched an app, Rebel Girls Dream On. What does the app do?
Yeah, so the app is our main digital destination for everything that we create digitally, and it's where families and children can find our podcast episodes, where they can find bedtime stories, where they can find rich soundscapes. We have over 110 pieces of content with music, with original sound design, and it's one of the most magical objects, I think, that Rebel Girls has created over the years. So I highly recommend that you download it and try it out. I think it's usually children have a lot of fun.
I'll definitely do that. Tell me more about your projects, 100 immigrant women who changed the world and 100 real-life tales of Black girl magic. They weren't translated into Romanian yet, and I'm curious to find out more about them. Tell me, how did these projects start and who are they addressed to?
Yeah, so they really reflect the evolution of Rebel Girls as a brand and as a company as well, because, at some point I realized that it was important to have more people join me in writing these stories. And so with the latest volume, especially with 100 tales of Black girls magic, I didn't write those stories. We asked Kashawn Thompson, who is the founder of the Black Girl Magic hashtag, the creator of the Black Girl Magic hashtag, to write those stories and to be involved in the creation with also journalist Lily Worknath. They are both Black women. They are both very involved with the fight for representation of Black women in media, in literature, like in children's books, and so it was very, very important for me to make this step and really to have a real plurality of voices drive the new volumes in the series. And in the case of the immigrant women, that came before, and in a time where immigration, I mean, of course, like immigration is still like one of the most complex issues of our time, and so I thought it was really important to talk about it from the perspective of women, because the vast majority of immigrants around the world are women, and yet we rarely talk about immigration from the perspective of women and what that means for them. And so we started collecting stories about immigrant women throughout history from all over the world, so that children could be exposed to this theme in a different way, which is, not what you typically hear on the news.
Yeah, it's a great job that you do, because we really lack representation of non-white, characters in children's books. So it was a great idea that you have. I also read, when doing my research, about Guida per bambine ribelle alla scoperta del corpo che cambia. So this is a book about, it's a guide for girls going through puberty. Tell me about that. What makes your guide special?
So that guide, it's in Italian, right? So that's a special project that we did with our Italian partner and publisher, Mondadori, and it's a guide for young girls who are going through puberty, to help them understand what's going on with their body, with their mind, their psyche, because it's a moment of incredible transformation, right? And we know that, again, it's one of those moments where unfortunately girls everywhere in the world still lack the tools, like, to really understand what's going on, and so we thought that it could be very helpful and interesting and fun, like, to offer them some guidance and some new tools with a guide that is illustrated, that is written in a way that is very of course, like, scientifically based and researched, because we worked on it with a gynecologist, with a psychiatrist, but it is also incredibly fun and accessible, and the illustrations are very fun. So it's really very much aligned with the mission of Rebel Girls, of building confidence in girls and really, like, inspiring the next generation of girls to be more in control of their body, of their personality, of their dreams, of what they want to become when they grow up.
Is it culturally based on Italian girls, or do you think I could persuade the publisher in Romania to translate it for Romanian girls as well?
I think you should absolutely persuade the publishers in Romania.
We definitely need fun guides for the girls.
Yes, it's absolutely universal, so it doesn't have Italian connotations. No.
Thank you for that. In the end, I would like to ask you to, give a message to your Romanian readers, if you have anything, worth.
Yes, I would love to. Actually, I come from a small town in Tuscany, and as you know, like, we have lots of Romanian immigrants in Tuscany, in Italy, and I've become friends, really good friends. Some of my closest friends in my hometown are a Romanian family with two young children, and they are some of my biggest fans and supporters. So I have now like this incredible connection to Romanian through my small, tiny village in Tuscany.
That's so nice to hear. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on today's interview. I hope many, many girls will be inspired by your work and will keep doing what you do, because you're doing a great job for our girls. So much.
I really hope that, Romanian girls and families will continue to read our stories. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.